When the cops stormed into Martin's house, all he had left was a broken door, a terrified daughter, and a pride they tried to crush. He thought the law would protect him, but instead he faced courtroom scorn and mockery. But here's the twist: the man everyone underestimated found a way to turn the system on its head. How? Let's start from the very beginning. Martin Jenkins, a 35-year-old black schoolteacher from Ohio, lived what most would call an unremarkable life. His modest home in a quiet Columbus suburb reflected his personality: orderly, simple, and filled with love for his 10-year-old daughter, Christina. As a math teacher, Martin often stayed late at school, helping struggling students and earning their respect. A widower, his world revolved around Christina, the brightest star in his otherwise predictable life. That Friday evening, after a long week of teaching fractions and calming classroom chaos, Martin was finally unwinding. He had just finished the dishes and was flipping through TV channels when an aggressive knock at the door shattered the peaceful rhythm of his evening. It wasn't just a knock. It was more like someone trying to break down the door. Before Martin could even react, the door burst open with a deafening crash. Standing there, boots planted firmly on his shattered threshold, was Officer Jacob Whitmore, a 42-year-old cop infamous around the neighborhood for his heavy-handed tactics. Without so much as a greeting, Jacob stormed in, his piercing gaze sweeping across the room like he owned the place. "Where's the stash, huh? Don't play dumb with me," he barked, his voice dripping with accusation. He didn't wait for an answer. Instead, he started yanking drawers open, flipping over furniture and scattering everything in his path. Martin stood frozen for a moment, stunned by the chaos unfolding in his living room. Finally, he found his voice. "What on earth are you doing in my house? You can't just come in here like this." Whitmore didn't even look at him. "Oh, I can, and I just did," he spat, shoving a lamp off a table. "Now where are you hiding the drugs, pal?" Martin stepped forward, his hands trembling with rage. "I'm a schoolteacher, not some criminal. You've got the wrong house, and for the record, you're scaring my—" Before he could finish, Whitmore shoved him hard against the wall. The impact knocked the breath out of Martin, and he winced as the officer twisted his arm behind his back. "Save it," Whitmore snarled. "You think you're special? You think you're above the law?" Upstairs, Christina, who had been doing her homework, heard the commotion and crept down the stairs. Her small face, framed by pigtails, appeared in the hallway just in time to see her father pinned against the wall, his expression a mix of pain and fury. "Daddy!" she cried, her voice quivering with fear. The sound made Whitmore pause. He turned, his eyes narrowing as he spotted the girl. "Get her out of here," he growled, "or I'll have to remove her myself." Martin struggled against the officer's grip. "Leave her alone, she's just a kid." Whitmore glared at him, then released his hold with a shove that sent Martin sprawling onto the floor. He straightened his uniform and sneered, "Consider this a warning. You people think you can do whatever you want. Not on my watch." He stomped out, leaving the door hanging off its hinges and the house in shambles. For a moment, the room was silent except for Christina's soft sobs. Outside, a few neighbors stood on their porches, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. None dared intervene except for Mrs. Henderson, an elderly widow who had been recording everything from her window. Her hands shook as she gripped her phone, but she knew this might be the only chance to document what had happened. Inside, Martin sat on the floor, his body aching, his mind racing. He wrapped his arms around Christina, trying to reassure her, even as his own world seemed to collapse. As Whitmore's squad car disappeared down the street, his parting words echoed in Martin's ears. "Get used to it. You'll be seeing a lot more of me." The morning after the raid, Martin Jenkins sat in the hospital, his arm in a sling, his ribs sore, and his mind racing. The doctor had examined his injuries and casually suggested you might want to think twice before filing a report. These things can get complicated. Martin's jaw tightened. "Complicated or not, I'm not letting this slide. My daughter deserves better, and so do I." Enter Lawrence Davis, a no-nonsense local attorney with a reputation for taking on the toughest cases. When Martin explained what had happened, Lawrence didn't hesitate. "This isn't just about you, Martin. This is about standing up to a system that's been broken for far too long. Let's make it count." Filing a lawsuit against Officer Jacob Whitmore and the police department felt like David going up against Goliath, but Martin was ready. The trial, however, was nothing short of brutal. Judge Evelyn Banks, a stone-faced woman with a reputation for siding with law enforcement, presided over the case. From the start, the defense painted Martin as a potential criminal. "Isn't it possible," the attorney asked, "that Mr. Jenkins might have something to hide? After all, no one thoroughly searched his home." "Objection," Lawrence shot back. "That's pure speculation." "Overruled," Judge Banks said, barely glancing up. Meanwhile, Whitmore carried himself with smug confidence, his smirk a constant reminder of his unchecked power. During a recess, he sauntered past Martin and whispered, "You're wasting your time. Nobody's going to believe you." Martin clenched his fists but stayed silent. He knew the odds were stacked against him, but giving up wasn't an option. His family, including his sister Angela, rallied around him, filling the courtroom gallery for moral support. Mrs. Henderson's video, though shaky, became a critical piece of evidence. It clearly captured Whitmore pushing Martin and shouting threats. Despite this, the defense leaned heavily on the claim that Whitmore was acting on an anonymous tip. He was simply doing his job to ensure public safety, the defense argued. "Where's the proof of this tip?" Lawrence demanded. "Where's the warrant? The officer had no legal grounds to enter my client's home." But Judge Banks brushed it off. "The police are entrusted to maintain order. Let's not question their decisions without clear evidence." It was disheartening, but Martin and Lawrence pressed on. The turning point came when Mrs. Henderson's video was uploaded online. Within days, it went viral, and the hashtag #JusticeForMartin began trending. People from across the country voiced their outrage. And even more damning, other victims of Whitmore came forward with their stories of abuse. The mounting public pressure shifted the atmosphere in the courtroom. Whitmore's confident facade began to crack. Martin, once a quiet schoolteacher, found himself at the center of a national conversation about accountability and justice. As the trial dragged on, Martin looked at his daughter, Christina, and felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for her future and the hope that no one else would have to endure what they had. After months of grueling legal battles, Martin Jenkins' case finally reached the state Supreme Court. Presiding over the hearings was Judge Andrew Carter, a respected African-American jurist known for his integrity and unwavering commitment to justice. His presence alone sent a clear message: this case would be different. By now, the tide had shifted. The mounting pressure from the media and public had forced the police department to cough up critical evidence. Their anonymous tip? Non-existent. Worse yet, investigations revealed that Officer Jacob Whitmore had conducted illegal raids on at least 5 other black households in the area. Until now, the victims had stayed silent out of fear. But Martin's courage inspired them to come forward, their testimonies painting a damning picture of Whitmore's unchecked abuse of power. The week-long Supreme Court hearings were intense. Lawrence Davis, ever the sharp strategist, systematically dismantled every piece of the defense's argument. Whitmore, who had started the trial with his trademark arrogance, began to show cracks. His confident smirk was gone, replaced by darting eyes and nervous fidgeting, as witness after witness exposed his pattern of misconduct. On the final day, the courtroom was packed. The tension was palpable as Judge Carter delivered his verdict. His voice, calm but firm, echoed through the room. Officer Jacob Whitmore is hereby found guilty of abuse of power, assault, and falsifying reports. This court sentences him to 12 years in prison. Gasps filled the room, followed by a ripple of relieved applause. Martin sat frozen for a moment, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. He had done it. He had stood up to the system and won. The court also awarded Martin $500,000 in damages, an amount that couldn't undo the trauma but spoke volumes about his victory. Whitmore was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, his once intimidating presence reduced to a shadow of shame. Martin didn't look at him. His focus was on Christina, who ran into his arms the moment the gavel struck. But the story didn't end there. The internet exploded with celebrations. Videos of the courtroom moment went viral, and the hashtag #JusticeForMartin was everywhere. People praised Martin's resilience, calling him a hero for standing up not just for himself, but for every victim of injustice. Christina became a symbol of hope, her quiet strength resonating with countless others. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly neighbor who had bravely recorded the initial raid, was also celebrated. Her courage to speak out became a rallying cry for bystanders everywhere. Silence is complicity. As for Martin, he didn't let the victory go to his head. Instead, he poured the settlement money into the local school where he worked. New textbooks, upgraded facilities, and scholarships for underprivileged kids became his legacy. He wanted every child, no matter their background, to know that education was their ticket to a brighter future. When asked about his fight, Martin simply said, "I'm just a teacher who wanted to do the right thing. If I can stand up, so can you." His words echoed far beyond his small Ohio neighborhood, proving that even the most ordinary person could take on an unjust system and win. What would you have done in Martin's place? Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you or anyone you know ever faced a similar situation? Let us know, and don't forget to like and share this story to raise awareness. This story was created to shine a light on an important issue and inspire positive change. Together we can make the world a better place. Your opinion matters,